We normally do an orientation to just tell you where the emergency exits are, but it doesn't seem like this room has got one. So it doesn't matter. My naam is Wynand. I'm not an interesting person. The FBI would call me a person of interest. Hulle soek my waarskynlik altyd in die tyd. Hier ding werkie. Gaan jy eers hoor?
Did you put it on? No, you didn't put it on.
I thought somebody else would put it on for me. Okay.
To the right.
To the right.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. It's the first time I'm seeing this presentation. So I hope it's going to work for me. My naam is Wynand Engelbrecht. Op die bord is met 'n W. I'm a firefighter. I am a businessman. I am a fire consultant. And probably a whole lot of other things too. I'm going to try and challenge your thinking this morning. We're going to talk about the adverse effect of rational thinking and rational designs on firefighting operations. I'm going to prove to you this morning, hopefully once we finished here, Mr. Kuhn, Peter Kuhn. I hope that by the time we finished here this morning, you'll understand it if I say I don't think there's one perfect rational design in this country. Not one. If there was one rational design that's perfect, it would look different from the other rational designs. All rational designs look exactly the same. Got two oceans of water, a pump room, two pumps, sprinkler system that's designed by a technician or an engineer, or maybe both, or maybe neither, and so on. And we've got the latest, we're adding solar panels onto roofs like it's going out of fashion. We've now got a new environmental doctrine, a new religion which is called the environmental Gogga, and the prophet for that is Al Gore, the Messiah. I don't represent the Association of Life Safety Assessors. I am a member of the Association of Life Safety Assessors. What we did is 3 years ago, I called together the engineers, fire engineers, which of course there isn't such a term, EXA tells us, and I agree, FIASA, and then after we called them together and we created a new organization, then EXA said they wouldn't talk to FIASA because they wouldn't talk to an organization where there's plebs like myself, and so we had to go again. So we left FIASA with the 7 engineers, and then we created the Association of Life Safety Assessors, which consists mostly of consultants. A consultant is somebody that didn't get it right in the first instance, so they either teach or they consult. Membership for ALSA is from fire safety consultants, insurance, risk assessors, and serving senior fire service officers, NQF5, something like that. Then I'm going to, during the morning, cover this subject as well. There's a new sprinkler inspection, I almost said bureau, I wouldn't want to use that word, inspection body. You all know about my fights with the insurers and ASIP by now. You can quote me, I'm being taped in fact. It's going to go to the High Court in the ASIP case against me, I guess. So please don't you make controversial statements while we're talking. I'll make the controversial statements. But there's a new inspectorate that you take notice of during the day. And the interesting thing about an inspection body, whether it's for sprinklers or ventilation systems or whatever fire system it is, anybody could almost inspect a system. The problem comes in by the certification of the system. You have to certify it once you've finished. There's no point in having an inspection done and then you get a report instead of a certificate. You understand? Is dit Engels wat ons praat of wat ons Afrikaans praat, lieweste? Yeah, but nobody understands me because I said. I understand. Thank you. You're a star. There are 4 fields of study. If I run away from my presentation, please just point to the board and say you're running away with yourself, because I do have this habit. There are 4 study fields in fire. Fire science, technology, engineering, and building construction. And that term fire engineering is wrong. It's actually just engineering. You can't engineer fire. You engineer systems which either detect or suppress fire. That's really what it is. And so EXA has already taken on all the fire engineers and explained to them why they can't be fire engineers. They have to be mechanical or civil or one of the other disciplines. And then they may also do work in the fire fraternity. But fire science is really where the fire operations people dwell. They're interested in the flame and the smoke, the behavior of the flame and the smoke. That's what they're interested in, a firefighter. I'm a firefighter, I want to know what's the flame going to do, what's the smoke going to do. Then fire technology is the technology that firefighters work with, not the other technology, not systems technology. Then there's engineering and there's building construction, which I've put on its own. And all of these have an impact on fire operations and the study of fire. There are at least 1 million textbooks on fire technology and engineering in the world. It's a well-documented subject. And yet, when I hear about these rational designs, and I am called in sometimes to look at designs, not that I understand it, I sometimes don't even know whether I'm looking at the thing the right way around. To tell you the honest truth. If you don't give me a 3D picture, then I'm probably lost. It's not really that bad, but surely we design with the end in mind. We don't design just to say, well, you know, I designed this thing, I built it myself, and now I've got to live with it myself. Or in it myself. I was standing here on this veranda just earlier this morning. I was watching this 4-way stop. It's not really a 4-way stop. It's more like a 4-way crash course. The larger and the more expensive the car, the stupider we are. It's a little steel capsule with 5 people in it, normally called a family. And then we challenge one another. It's the only place in life where you, by pointing a finger, showing, you know, I'll trust you, come, and, you know, sort of, we play speed cop, and then 4 cars move, and luckily we very well miss one another. And we're not even interested in our own lives in this little car. Why would we worry about a building that we've handed over? You say, Wynand, you're really stupid to talk to us like this because we're all professional people. Well, those are all professional drivers, or professional people driving those cars. But I wonder if we had to register as professional drivers, how many would really be able to register as professional drivers? The point that concerns me is not the car or the building, it is what we call life safety. You see, when it suits us, we say sprinklers, for instance, is a life safety issue. We say to the client, you have to put in sprinkler system because the law says it's a life safety issue. Yet it's a 32-meter high building, and you and I know, and if you don't, then hopefully you'll hear it this morning, that sprinklers will not activate at 32 meters. Sprinklers will not activate at 16 meters, and Dr. Philip de Vos tested them at the CSIR in 1998. And he told us they will not activate beyond 11 meters. So why do we sell it to the client? Then, because we realize it's a grudge purchase, we say to the client, that's a life safety issue. You are compelled to do so, which of course is nonsense. You're not compelled to do anything. That's why we have rational reasoning. So that's the point that I'm going to come down to this morning. Is going to try and see if we can shake the rational tree. There are competencies declared. Everybody is talking about competencies. As I grow older, I'm almost 100 years old, and every 7 years there's a new itch in the world. Now the latest itch is competencies. Are you competent? Are you a competent person? I hear this all the time. Are you a competent person? As if the opposite of that should just be incompetent. Well, I've never been declared competent. I actually applied to EXA. 8 months later, they still hadn't even cleared my check. So I don't think they're going to declare me competent. But competencies, rational fire designs, according to 10400, has to be done by a PR-Eng or a PR-Eng tech. There are technicalities to that as well. We see a new document, a policy document that EXA had sent out, and EXA, a director of EXA actually challenges EXA at the moment in the High Court. And this person called me and he says, I hear you are busy, you have personal contacts at the Public Protector and the Competitions Commission. Don't you want to lay a complaint against EXA as well? I said, man, bring it on. This is what I do, I lay complaints. So he sent me all his High Court information. And I said, but why did you lay a complaint against the EXA? You're a director. He says, because they captured. I said, by whom? He says, by idiots. I said, well, I can't take that to the Competitions Commission. The whole damn lot is captured by idiots. But it's true that EXA has got status problems with themselves. But yet they are the ones that have to determine these competencies, and we're bound to that at the moment, and I guess for the next 10 years we'll have to bow before them. A competent person, fire engineering, so PR-Eng or a PR-Eng tech. Then there are fire systems. According to page 76, I think it's a 2013 version of the National Building Regulations. They've got so many versions, it's like a whole thing. You have an index of versions. All fire systems are also each individually a rational design. Now, if you have this favorite sprinkler company or ventilation company that you give all your work to because you trust them so much and you've got this wonderful relationship with them, and you know for a fact that they use a technician to design a system, please don't use them again. Or at least don't mention it here, because I've got this stupid habit. I run to the Public Protector. So don't say it where I can hear it. You are supposed to have fire systems designed by competent persons in the definition of the law. We can't make up our own law. We can't make our own rules as we go along. We are still supposed to be some kind of a first world country. I don't know what happened to the second world. It's like lost between now and 1992. Fire system rational designs. There's education issues, training, experience, and contextual knowledge issues that have to be considered. And the National Building Regulations does not require of a competent person to be declared competent by EXA. So 3 years ago, EXA embarked on this avenue where they said they also want to accept declaring competent persons fire engineering. They also want to declare competencies. They declared 3 people competent, and all 3 of them I personally think are not competent. I'll give you the names, tea time, you can get it from me. And so EXA realized that they've embarked on something they understand nothing about, so they stopped it. Now we've got this dilemma that the fire departments, bless their souls, they say, but you have to be a competent person registered with EXA. I say, but EXA doesn't have such a category. They've got a category of people that they now call practitioners. It's like a doctor. They practice even after they'd studied for 7 years. They still practice, and they mostly practice on me. There are no such things as legally defined competent persons, but the Act does help us, or the regulation does help us. The National Building Regulations says that a competent person is somebody that is deemed to be competent, not declared competent, deemed to be competent, by virtue of experience and knowledge and qualifications and, a whole lot of other things. And so you look at a person and you can deem him to be competent. You don't have to define him to be competent or declare him to be competent. Deemed to be competent. Here's what is currently happening. And of course my friend Rudolph and I are always fighting about these things. He doesn't see the light. But that you already know, you've known him forever. There is no body, entity at the moment that can declare competency. So what we've done is we have this new sprinkler, this new fire systems inspection entity, We have gone the route of having it accredited by SANAS, which was the right route to go. And we then affiliated ourselves with the what is the plumbers? The plumbers professional body? PIRB. PIRB, we aligned ourselves with them. And then we also aligned ourselves now with SACAS, which holds higher accreditation than the SABS. And in that association, we are now looking at putting a body together that will, of its own accord, try and declare competencies and see if we can at least get somewhere with it. Once we've done it in that body, we will move back to EXA and say, EXA, maybe you really want to become a professional body and also look at our definition. So at the moment, no, there's nothing.
At the moment, it's the building control officer.
The building control officer isn't competent himself.
Yeah, but he decides.
I mean, he doesn't even belong to a professional body. So,
I know.
yeah. But it is, you're right. It is for the building control officer to determine in terms of Form 1 and Form 2 and Form 3 and Form 4 and Form 19 whether you are competent. It's true. And but they don't even have their own professional body. And I know that Rudolph tells the whole world that they are creating a body. They're not creating a body. He's been telling the world that for the last 2 years. DTI have been telling the whole world for the last 8, 9, 10 years that they're working on reviewing the Act. They're not reviewing the Act. The only oak that sits there at DTI that can review the Act is Saboon Kumalo, and he's having his sticky fingers into the SABS instead of doing his own work. So we're not going to see a review of the Act. We're not going to see a review of the regulations. Yet they just recently, in January again, sent out a DSS on 10400. Now, how can you review a standard if you haven't even reviewed the regulations? And how can you review the regulation if you haven't reviewed the Act? And so it's a big blunder. It's a lie. And so what we're doing here is we're just throwing thoughts around, and then we're going home, and we're going to keep on in this confusion, I guess. Sad. But it's true. I'm sure I took a sip of my water, but there's still enough. Okay. If I drink too much water, it's not only because I'm diabetic, I'm also very nervous. You're a very intimidating group of people. I do firefighting training in Iran, and that's not even. I watch Mr. Trump speaking at night. Every night he threatens Iran. I'm moving back there tomorrow night for a couple of weeks again. That doesn't scare me as much as you do. When you just sit there like that. Rudolph, review the Act, man. It's not Rudolph's fault. You know that poor oak, he is the national regulator. Can you believe it? You think of the national regulator, you think it's this big division inside of DTI, and it's it's a splinter group, man. It's one oak. It's him. If he falls over tonight, there's no regulator. Advocate Elsie de Waal says to him, Mr. Opperman, there by the public protector, she says, Mr. Opperman, you must be tired. Because you're the only one that's shouldering this responsibility. And it's true. If you hear that he's resigned or he's pensioned or retired, know that there is no regulator. True. Systems, rational designs must be done on sprinklers, deluges, foam water systems, gaseous systems, detection, fire stopping, and installation. And fire stopping, of course, is just part of passive fire protection, which I think is the most neglected of all, passive fire protection. Because we don't actually understand what it means. It means passive, so it means we must be passive, so we don't do nothing. No. I termed these new fanciful things that you guys design, I term them big boxes. They may be 80 meters by 100 meters by 32 high. They may be 150 kilometers long. I don't know how long the devil these things are still going to become. I drive through Royerskraal there by Woolworths, It's mountains that you look at. It's intimidating. It's not buildings, man. I mean, you stand inside these monstrosities, and I can't imagine why anybody would want to design a thing like that. Because it's going to burn down, you know that. Nobody's going to fight that fire. I'm a professional firefighter. I'm not going to take a fire crew in there. In fact, I run a private fire brigade service. My first response is a BK-117 helicopter. I've got helicopter-trained fire crews. I will not take on a fire in a big box. Who'd be so stupid as to send people back where people has just run out? So, hey, come here, you go in there. These people ran out, they don't want to face the music, you go in there. He says, I got a baby, he says, I don't care. Go in there and go fight the fire. So what is it that made us decide that we've got to design these monstrosities? Is it just ego? It can't be practicalities. You know that London and New York and Los Angeles, the city councils of those three cities have already taken principal policy decisions that says a big box will be allowed to just burn down naturally. The brigades will enter the building, do search and rescue, stand back respectfully, and watch it burn down. And you say to the developer, this is what we're going to do, and they say, but you can't do that, it's my building. And then they say, well, then you can't build it in London, or Los Angeles, or New York. Yet you can build it in Bronkhorstspruit. My magtig. Waar gaan daai ouens nou 'n fire engine vanaf kry? A ground ladder, people, a ground ladder, the extension ladder that they extend, the ground ladder, is a 20, 35 foot. 35 foot is like 12.5 meters, man. The building is 32 meters long. So hier's die gebou, ploink. Hier sit die leertjie. No, you can't do that. I say, why don't you at least, in your rational design, seeing that we have this fantabulous term, rational design, every damn thing is rational today. Why don't you put up catwalks on the side of the roof so the firefighters can at least run up the building, cut a hole in the roof and ventilate the building? You say, but we did a rational design on the ventilation also. I say, okay, so you did it. And what did you come to? Now we came to 3.44% of the floor area. I say, man, I can just cut the roof, take a pike pole, open it, I've got 19%. Just let me get onto the roof. You say, but the building regulation doesn't say that I must put ladders on the side. Well, that's why you call it a rational design. It's because the building regulation doesn't say it. Here's the thing. We talk about a subject as complicated as fire without those people who are going to fight the fire in the room. You say, but Wynand, I went down to Pretoria and they've got a whole division there, they call it fire safety. Okay, here's what they ask you normally. They look at you and then they say, have you ever been in a fire, Dominic? What they actually want to, what they want to do is they want to show off. They want to pretend like they know fire. Now, let me give you the profile of the person that asks you this question. They came out of school, they went to TUT. Tegnische Universiteit van Tshwane, of iets van die aard. Ek weet nie, hoekom noem hulle het so nie. There they got a diploma, a 3-year diploma or a 4-year diploma. They equal that kastig to a degree. And they got a degree in klipgooi en brandsteek. Omdat hulle lorries afgebrand het op die campus, kry hulle 'n diploma in fire. Dan kom hulle by Pretoria, dan kry hulle, nou word hulle 'n fire safety officer. Nou vra hulle jou hierdie stupid vraag. Have you ever been in a fire? No, her skin would have been burnt if she'd been in a fire. The real question they wanted to ask her, but which they dare not, because they can't answer in the affirmative themselves, they really want to know from her, Dominic, have you ever been in command of fire teams at a major fire? But you see, they can't ask that question because they themselves had never been there. So what you're sitting with is you're sitting with a couple of academic bleeksiele, nerds. Hulle diplomas. Hy hulle muur vol. And now they want to reason the things that I'm discussing here this morning. They pretend that they know these things, but they don't. And it's not your fault. You didn't know it when you went there. You thought they're all specialists. They're not even doctors, man. How can they be specialists? And so as we progress, and go from one generation to the next. We drop the ball. Ons laat die pap val tussen die mond en die hand. Of tussen die hand en die mond. Daar's nie Engelse uitdrukking. You can't drop the porridge, man. Daar's nie. I mean, how would that sound now? Maar in Afrikaans sê ons laat ons laat val die pap op die grond tussen die hand en die mond. Big box development. Here's the thing about big boxes. There are two firefighting strategies. The one is you do an aggressive internal fire attack. You need really mad people, mad firemen. They used to give me training centers normally. When I was a young instructor, they would put me and they would call it Siberia because it really got rough on my terrain. And they would send me all these oaks that aren't really technically minded and really academic. And the more rough they were, the more I loved them. Because that is the kind of a person that you can send into a room full of flame and say, rub the flame off the pillar, and they would actually do that. We call it an aggressive internal attack. For aggressive internal attack, you need fire engines, pumps, less water, 600 liters a minute to 450 liters a minute. The National Building Regulation says 1,200 liters a minute. I say, who said so? They say the SABS. I say, when did they do firefighting? Now the clerks there said so. Okay, so now we've got hydrants, requirements for 1,200 liters a minute. And these fire officers tell you the same, because they don't know that a transition has been made between high volumes, and we've gone from high volume to low volume to high pressure to water mist attacks, internal aggressive. The problem with a big box, you can't do an aggressive internal attack. You've got to do a defensive attack, and for a defensive attack, you need 300 millimeter mains. You need 8,500 and 10,000 liters of water flow on those deck monitors so that you can protect the exposures, not the building that's on fire. That's going to burn down. I already told you so. You didn't believe me, you laughed. It's going to burn down. Your building that you've designed that sits in Rooihuiskraal, in Brakpan in Vulcania, doesn't matter where the devil you've made this big box, it's going to burn down, man. You say, but I put one of those fancy systems in the roof. ESFR, you say. Sprinkler system. We've got two oceans of water sitting in the backyard, 1 million liters of water. 1 million liters of water. Fire engine carries 2,000 liters. So you are going to queue 500 fire engines like that. The nominal water flow, 6,000 liters a minute, that's a minimal for defensive firefighting. And you need water towers. You need mechanical ladders and platforms instead of fire engines. You understand what I'm talking to you about? The design that you use determines the strategy the fire department has to follow, but they don't know it and you don't know it, and therefore we sit with a building that we can do nothing with the building when it burns. Because they don't have the engines, and you didn't know that it was supposed to be like that. You say, so what do we do now? Now we're at an impasse. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know. We're just going to burn a whole lot of factories down over the next 3-4 decades, I guess. You say, all of those? Yes. Are you running away? Am I speaking too loud? Okay. I think we as professionals ought to know that we should ask them to consult us. I think that's also the truth. I mean, how would they know, for instance, where's your office? Somewhere in Groenkloof. How would they know that you've got an office? So they're going to go to the crash, and then next 5 minutes later they go to your office. But they don't know your office, but you know where they are. The disconnect is actually not between the PR tech and the PR engineer. Those are both academics. The disconnect is between the tradesman, me. Firefighting is a trade. It's not a profession, it's a trade. And so we get vocational training up to 3-year diploma level, but vocational training. And there's a big difference, of course, between vocational training and academic training. I mean, we all know that. And so the disconnect is that the fire service don't even understand their own problem. The fire service had in the past 20 years moved into an academic direction. I now hear they're talking about 7 years qualifications they want to offer at TUT. I say, man, you don't even do the first 3 years properly. What do you want to do with 7 years? You need to fight a fire and then explain to the architect what the problem is and arrive at a solution and then call that a rational design. You see, rational design isn't something you just find in a book somewhere. It's not true. EXA has now got a problem. A whole lot of engineers approached EXA after they registered these so-called fire engineers. And a couple of civil engineers and mechanical engineers approached EXA and said, but we've been doing fire for the last 20 years. So then EXA gave them a letter to the effect that they may do fire rational designs. And then what they submitted was spook stories. Now EXA is trying to retract those letters. Now those engineers are taking them to the High Court. So now we've got engineers sitting out there with an EXA letter and they have no idea what a fire is. No idea. We're sitting in a very bad spot in our history. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how we're going to resolve this thing. I know in the next few decades we are going to lose buildings, and if we lose buildings, we lose lives. But hey, we're making money. Defensive, last paragraph, requires extensive use of elevated aerial devices. These machines cost between 9 and 12 million rand. The councils don't even budget these kind of figures any longer for fire engines. Gone are the days where they would say to a developer, if you're going to put up a development of R1 billion, then at least you should build a firehouse and provide a fire team. Oh, my telephone. I think it's Google. They call me this time of the morning just to update. They can call my wife. She knows all the answers. It's okay. It's going to bother you if it rings there. The National Fire Code, there's a need for a National Fire Code. We do not have a National Fire Code. And so, a senior officer in Johannesburg Fire Department told me the other day, in his ignorance, he says, but we have a code. I say, you're talking about a building code. That's a fire code I'm talking about. If I want to put a helipad in a high-rise building, what do? They say, you go rational design. I say, you've got such a poor excuse for being alive. Anything and everything can't be rational. Why don't you just buy yourself a rational car and run into a rational wall and get it over and done with? We don't have a National Fire Code. A National Fire Code would typically be NFPA 1 and NFPA 101. Those are fire codes. If you have a house in Table Mountain in the Fynbos there and you want to extend a deck, the fire code would cover that. The building regulation doesn't, because the building regulation doesn't have the word Fynbos in it. I'm doing a whole lot of work towards getting a National Fire Code. I don't want to say too much about it or spend too much time on it, but NFPA is coming out and we are converting NFPA 101 into NFPA 101 SA. 10400 provides for the compliance of the shell, but the shell is not a major risk factor. After the certificate of occupancy, sorry, I should have turned this thing altogether down. This is what I should have done, because if your phones ring and it's for me, just take a message. After the certificate of occupancy has been issued, this is what happens. The building regulation says you must have an escape door. And you say to the owners of this building, you must have an escape door. They say, but I've got one. They say, but you can't have this here and the lock on it. They say, where does the regulation say that? And the regulation doesn't say it. And that's why you need a building code. So up to the point where the building is handed over, there's a plan for it. There's a timeline. We're going to design it, we're going to submit rational designs and get the whole thing done. Then we're going to build the building and hand it over, and everybody's going to cut, and cutting the lint and sly, handskit and blomme and the hele bloody lot, and daar gaat ons. And now the problem starts. Now we put the fire load into the building and the humans. And this is really what concerns me more than anything else. I'm not codependent as a firefighter. I'm not even systems dependent as a firefighter. I couldn't care less whether a riser on a stair is this high or that high or that high. I just jump over it. If I can't, I put a ladder over it and I run over it. I'm not code dependent in firefighting. I'm not systems dependent. If there's a sprinkler system activated when we arrive at the fire, because we work with water mist nozzles, we can't work under this cascade with water mist nozzles, so we turn the sprinkler system down. So maybe not even 2% of the water had been used yet. So we're not systems dependent either. But the fact that we are not systems dependent or codependent doesn't mean that the code doesn't have a place. It does have a place. But therefore, when we design, we need to make sure that the ultimate, and that's why I say we must design with the end in mind. And the end is that people are going to use this building. You say, well, I'm not going to be here. Okay, but your children are in some college that another architect has designed, and so on. You know, we all live in each other's buildings. Was what I said so serious that they activate a hooter? I said, your car. Jump through the window. Okay, it's over. We ought to consider the fire load potential, but mostly the load is not fully known. As engineers and architects are not always fully au fait. And I give you a way out of the reasoning here. I say maybe you didn't know what the fire load is going to be. And then I realize sometimes, but maybe you did, and maybe we jump out the plan. And here's what we do. We play this J2, J3 game, where we submit one and occupy on another classification, and we think now we've caught the fire department. Yeah, sometimes we know what the fire load is going to be. Chemicals, heaters, carpets, vinyl, furniture, humans. I did 2 major fire investigations in the last year. The one was Brown Park fire, 18th of April last year, opposite the Civic Center in Johannesburg. They lost the top floor. And the other one was the Premier's building, downtown. And here's what's weird about the Premier's building. London, we had this fire. What is that plek's naam? Glenville, somethingville. Yes, and we sat and we were all shocked and we were watching the screen and said, never in this country. It's like the Nazis. After the Nazis, the world says, never ever again. Ag hulle lieg man. Daar's Yemen en almal is in die moeilikheid. And they said, never again, Grenville. Ek hoor oral nou Grenville. Man, die Premier's building, hy het 'n gesig, die Premier se bakkies is daar teen die gebou geplak, met 'n PVC strip, right up to the top of the building. If that fire started on the 3rd floor instead of the 8th floor, that whole building would have burned down. 2-3 days ago, I rode past Bedford Center. Will you believe me that they've just strapped a PVC banner, the full eastern side of that whole center. It's sitting there for the architects to see, the fire brigade to see, everybody else to see, and we said, never again, but we lied. Well, I can lie. I lied before I could walk. It's a common trait in my family. And so we all just lie to ourselves. We say never again until somebody says, I'll give you 500,000 rand if you do it. En dan sê jy, eenie, meenie, miny, mo, catch your wallet, buy it, stow. En dan gaan jy vir die deal. Zoek, daar gaan die PVC screen. Murder and Robberies Building, Bedford View, Marion Roberts. I hope you guys didn't design that steel screen that sits on the outside of those two buildings. They've got a stainless steel screen. The environmentalists, they built themselves a shrine there now for a green building. So the building is rather cool until it catches fire, because what they've got a steel screen with an aggregate about that size. Now what happened in school, when I was in school 100 years ago, we had what I think it's a Bunsen burner, and it's a flame, and there's a sieve, and then it would bend the flame. And this is exactly what's going to happen in that building. The heat will come out, it'll run into the screen, it'll bend, it'll go upward, and they've built themselves a chimney in a modern building. And the fire department is going to try and rescue me from the outside, and they look at me through the screen, and they won't be able to work through there because there's one man on a ladder with... You good? Oh, okay. There's one man on a ladder with power tools. He can't get through that stainless steel screen. He can't throw a major stream through that stainless steel screen. It'll simply diffuse. And so that submission had to have been a rational design. Netcare, all their buildings now have solar panels on. Pretoria Oos Hospitaal, dit lyk soos 'n kragstasie. Ek weet nie waar kom hulle aan die idees nie. Alles is net solar panels. Not knowing and realizing that the fire brigade, if there's a fire in that ward, have to go through that roof. Firstly, to ventilate the void, and secondly, to get master streams through that roof. Now, how will they get master streams through a roof if there's solar panels on? So you see the architect and the contractor that put up the panels have decided on behalf of the fire brigade that they cannot do a defensive fire attack. They've got to do an internal attack. Yes, julle gaan lekker bly wees as ek klaar is. As hier is nou klaar, dankie. The building control officer in terms of A19 has to consider, acknowledge, rational design as a competent after such competent person has demonstrated various requirements set in A19, but the competency has to be proven ad hoc per project. The fire department has got this thing now in Joburg. I took them to the public protector. It's my favorite playground, is the public protector. You look at me skew, I report you. So I took the mayor there of Johannesburg, reported to him. Because they've now got this thing, only 7 engineers may submit to them rational designs. So I say, okay, and the 7 engineers are who? No, they're the guys that have historically been working on rational designs. I say, oh, historically, and what about the other engineers that also got letters from EXA? So because it's uncompetitive, I also took them to the cartels division, and you will see within the next 2 weeks, you will see arrests in this country like it's never been done before. We saw the sprinkler sector being raided on the 3rd of August last year, and we will see arrests now within 2 or 3 weeks. And the whole thing is going to stand on its head, so I hope you don't have contracts with those people. Because you must saw the list of companies that were raided on the 3rd of August. Yet I see we're still giving those companies work. It's like we don't see the light. And so I say, and so if one of those 7 now come with a nuclear power station, are they still competent? No, they're not. You can't be competent in everything, man. Yes, like. I mean, I think even you architects would say, I can, when I was a draftsman, I could do a house plan, and when I was a junior architect, I could do a strip mall, and I was a senior architect, I could do a 50-story high-rise. But can you do a power station, a nuclear power station? And the answer is probably no. And if you're not competent, then how can only 7 people be competent to do all the rational submissions? So the building control officer has got to take that into account. And it's easier if you, as the professional already, when you gather your professional team, make sure that the person that you're appointing as a fire engineer or a fire, whatever they call themselves, is really competent. I'm the only person in the country, well, I don't have a business card. Otherwise, my business card would have said, consultant, firefighting operations. So what the consultants and the engineers do is they ask me to the table and say, Wynand, we've now done all our rational work. Please come tell us what will happen if there's a fire in the building. And I then tell them, and they say, will you please type us up a cover letter? I say, no, I don't. I travel rather light. I actually don't have a, oh, here's a pen, a big pen. I would take this big pen, I'd make a few notes. I say, this is what you need to do, and then walk away from it. And they would have to panel beat it professionally. Verstaan jy, Erika? After the competent person is found acceptable, Los Angeles, the local authority has no right to scrutinize nor interrogate the rational design. Now here's the thing. I find this rather weird, Mr. Keane. You know, there's this weird thing that happens with engineers. They come to the fire department and they plonk down a design and they say, you have to accept this because I'm an engineer. And even I can see that's really stupid. Because you see, we're supposed to use BS 7974. I didn't know there's so much BS in the world. 7974 is a code number. And we're supposed to use that to do our rational designs against. And I ask the engineers, do you even have BS 7974 in your office? And they say what, Elian? No. No. I say to the fire officers, do you have it? And they say no. I say, no, how do you design and how do you evaluate? The cost is 70,000 rand. You see, you're worried about the money. BS 7974 on 2 different places in the code says that the engineer that does the rational design must consult with the local authority. So during the process of you designing your building, during the process of your base negotiations with your developer and your client, you have to go to the fire department and say, listen, fire department, we expect this is going to be a rational submission. This is what we're planning on doing. We are creating this monstrosity of a shopping mall, another one in the north of Pretoria. It looks like one of these days we will all live in shopping malls. And we'll use our houses as outings on a Friday afternoon to show our children where we used to live. That's how many shopping malls we've now got. And then you have to negotiate and get the fire department's input and play ping pong with them and go away and implement that and come back and negotiate again and play ping pong and go away. And only once you've done these things may you eventually come and say, here's my rational design, and now you have no further say in the matter. But until and unless you've done that, you can't say that to them. It's their fire. It's going to be their fire. If that's the only thing that they have, is their own fire. Acknowledgement of competence is not a blanket approval. I've said it. It is considered per Form 2 appointment, therefore per contract. You are the Form 1 appointees, mostly. Am I right? And the Form 1s will gather a whole lot of Form 2s. And the Form 2s will appoint the Form 3s. And the Form 2s will sign off the Form 4s. And so there's a whole formal thing. Annex B describes the methodology, and that's what I just told you. There I make another summary of the same thing. It's just to get more slides, because I didn't know what else I had to say. So I just, packaged another way of saying it. There's the 2 places, paragraph E, B 2.3. It's like a government thing, 1.1.1. E, fire service interventions, local requirements must be consulted. A fire? 7974. A fire rational design stands on its own as unique. It cannot be measured against DTS. If you take a rational design to the fire brigade, and here's the thing that complicates matters. Any building larger than 500 meters is a rational design. Because you have to have ventilation on that roof. And the ventilation, according to the page 76 commentary, is a rational design. So there's a rational design in the building, so the building becomes a rational design submission. But here's the dilemma, as we'll see just now. We've got houses where I live. I live on the edge of Henley on Klip. I wrote to the Minister of the Commonwealth in England the other day. I wanted to have my volunteer group there recognized by the Commonwealth. I said, we are the commoners and we live next to the wealthy. So, of course we're qualified to be in the Commonwealth. They didn't even reply. They don't understand in England. You cannot have a rational design and then the fire brigade should say with a little tick box. T1.1, T1.2. You can't do that. A rational design is either a rational design or it's DTS. You can't have a mixture of the two. If you have a rational design, it means that the thing that you rationalized influences so many other points. How can you say, I want to address my escape distance? I've got this big box. I've got a distance of my dimensions is 180 by 120. So where's your 45 meters travel distance? So you say, well, I'm going to put in sprinklers, then I've got 66 meters. And so you stretch it with little excuses. Well, why don't you put a refuge in the center of the big box, a controlled atmosphere with a 2-hour fire rating so that you can actually evacuate to the inside of the box, to the center of the box, and then out through a controlled atmosphere and a passage, and also bring the fire department in through that same entrance so that they can establish a forward command post. They can sit in that capsule for 2 hours while the building is burning down over them, and they'll still be safe. Now that's rational thinking. I've never seen a rational design like that in this country. I've never seen a rational design where you've got 50 floors and floor 10, 20, 30, 40 are refuge floors. We want to chase the whole lot down the stairs. They must now run down to the ground. Why? Why don't you have a refuge floor? If the professional indemnity, and this is really for the fire brigade that's so clever, the moment that the fire department changes or influences your rational design, and you sit there and you say, well, what must I do? And I say, well, just change that and that and that. You see, they've now taken responsibility for the rational design. And you've just signed away your responsibility. But who's got the indemnity? Is it you or the fire officer? Is it the engineer or the fire officer? Who is it that holds the indemnity? Can the fire officer take the responsibility on himself simply by having you sign something away? You see, it's still your signature that's on there. So he'll just turn around one day and say, but you changed it. There's your signature. I must now start talking faster. Town planning and fire protection, minimum 16. Here's the funny thing. We move new AMPSAC patients, clients into a building, new tenants into a building. And all of a sudden, because we're changing the tenancy and because we're changing the fire load, now we need to put in a sprinkler system. So what we do is we simply plonk down 2 fire tanks, sprinkler tanks, but we take away 16 bays. So what happens of the original town planning scheme now? That said you had to have the 16 bays. And so we say, well, this is life safety. In the year the thing comes in again, it's life safety, so it must overrule town planning. No, it's not life safety. So on what grounds do we do these things? We become maverick. At some point in our lives, the money becomes so important that we become maverick. Off-center rational reasoning. This is what I consider rational reasoning. Refuges in high-rise buildings. Refuges in big boxes. The use of rooftop swimming pools. There's a swimming pool sitting on that hotel roof. Why can't you feed the sprinkler system from that? It's gravity fed anyhow. Now you dig into the earth. You dig right down to China. You put another basement level in there to put these massive pumps that'll have to pump against this head. Why do you do it? There's water on the roof. There's so much water, and it's so high. On the way down, you've got to put in pressure relief valves. Why don't you use that water? You say, yeah, but if the building bursts, we've got these delusions of grandeur. The building will burst, and then, like in towering inferno, the water will just flush down the building, and it'll kill the people, and so on. Well, if your sprinkler system that you put in is so effective, it will put out the fire, and the building won't burst or explode, or nothing like that will happen. And if the sprinkler system that you put in isn't effective, then please don't put people into that hotel. That's easy. Boreholes for water supplies. NFPA 20 says you can use a borehole pump and a borehole to supply a sprinkler system from. A borehole pump is a submersible pump. And so the first time I ever used it, in defiance of the world, was in Takoradi docks in Ghana, protecting 18 million liters of diesel, sunk sleeves into the docks, into the harbour, and sunk submersible pumps, NFPA rated submersible pumps. One pressed steel tank, water tank for sprinklers, only has to be serviced every 24 years. Cylindrical tanks have to be serviced every 8 years. So I wrote to Ms. Zille, her of the Western Cape, and I said to her, are you aware that fire companies empty these cylindrical tanks every 8 years? 500,000 liters of water down the drain. Dan verf hulle hierdie tank toe. Dan pomp hulle daai water in hierdie tank in. Dan sit hulle nuwe water in daai tank in. 500,000 liter water. So hopefully she's going to come out with an executive instruction that says you cannot empty a fire tank unless you've got a permit from the provincial fire chief, Colin Diner. Hose racks instead of hose reels, and I'll show you what they look like now. Ring mains, to what purpose do you put these ring mains in? Around a factory. You say, it's for the fire brigade. I said, what does the fire brigade do with it? They say, no, there's hydrants there, so they must use it. Well, fire brigades don't use hydrants on ring mains around the building. They park their fire engines in front of the building. They run lines through the pump so they've got control over the pressures and the flows into the building. No fire commander by his right mind will send 2 firefighters and say, go pick yourself a hydrant, get into the building, we'll see you next Thursday. If you're still alive. If you're not, well, good riddance. You don't do that. So it's one of the bright ideas that the SABS had in writing 10400. Dr. Philip de Vos, scientist, the only ever sprinkler tests in this country was done by him. If anybody else, it doesn't matter what his initials are, say to you that they have tested sprinklers, you tell them they are a liar. Okay. Philip de Vos says he couldn't activate a sprinkler beyond 11 meters. Now, NFPA Foundation came out just this October, and they stretched it a little bit further, and they put that limit at 12.2 meters. So people, please rethink, why on earth would you want to sell your client a sprinkler system in a 16-meter high building? You say, but what else are we going to do? That's what rational thinking is for. You've got to make another plan. You've got to think out something else. Because it's not going to work. Smoke is intimidating because it's black, not because it's hot. Okay. So you need 141 degrees to activate that sprinkler head. In some instances, depending on the category of system, 67 degrees. But 67 degrees is high. So what you've got is, because there's such an enormous amount of carbon that has not been consumed yet, the carbon is what rises, and that's what, of course, gives you the idea that it's smoke. So it's cold carbon. It looks like smoke, and you think it's hot. And so after 8 meters, it already starts cooling down even further, and it starts packing down, and the warm air now has to move through the cold layer that's stacking down, and so you don't get the accumulated heat that you require. You're talking about an in-rack situation. You're talking about racks, and you've got a fire that starts in the aisle. There were boxes in the aisle on the warehouse floor, and the fire started, it rolled up against the racks, and now that distance between the top of the rack and the roof is, say, 7 meters. Of course it will activate it. The question is, why did it reach that point without being extinguished? You've got sprinklers in the rack, but sprinklers in the rack don't work. You say, Wynand, are you completely stupid? Het jy kouse gerook? Ja, ek het my kouse gerook. En toe kom ek by hierdie gevolgtrekking uit, that sprinklers in the rack cannot activate. Say the rack, the flue space sits here, and here's the aisle, and here we've stacked a lot of boxes. If the fire starts here in the aisle, that's 2.5 meters from the sprinkler head, but the heat rises vertically. So we're setting light to both ends of the racks, now the open ends of both racks, and it takes it to the roof, and yet here's a sprinkler system sitting right here. You actually need a firestorm in a building before you'll activate those sprinkler heads. And for this reason, I was part of a development team that 2 years ago developed the TSS system for in-rack protection, and we've done over 100 tests for Agrema, which is your third possibility of having a product or a plan approved. And we have never used more than 686 liters of water to suppress a fire and to put it out, even with tires in the racks. Sprinklers do not activate in the flue unless the fire starts almost underneath the sprinkler head. Okay, so even if you say there's 7 meters between the rack and the roof, how did the fire get to the rack? Because fires don't start there in the racks. Fires don't start in the roof. So we put sprinklers in the roof because we know we're going to chase this fire from the floor to the roof. Why did we not suppress it on the floor? This is where fires start, where people operate. Yeah, nowhere else. There's a rack. Daar sit 'n klomp bokse met koeboontjies. Toegedraai in 'n plastiek sak. Hoe kan die brand daar begin? 1 million liters of water, 2,000 liters in a fire engine, 500 fire engines. And so I did a little exercise. If I take the ladders and the platforms away, Joburg, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and Cape Town only have less than 200 fire engines. So what we say is we so depend on these 2 tanks full of water that they are better, these 2 tanks full of water are better than all those fire brigades. And then I went further and I added New York to that, and I still can't get 500 fire engines. We are being ridiculous. When you see the rest of these calculations that I'm talking about, there's 7974 again. I'm going to get to calculations now that you'll see why I say it's ridiculous. You say, are you really the CEO of a sprinkler inspection company? Yes, I am. You say, but you're breaking the whole thing down. Yes, I'm doing that too. I think I'm the most realistic maverick that there is. I don't know anybody that's so nice as what I am. My mother said so. There's a conventional hose reel, or what we call a car wash equipment. Now the fire brigade says that this little pipe that sits here from there to the floor may not be a copper pipe, for instance. I say, why not? They say it'll burn through. The firestorm will be so severe. I say, and if it burns through, so what? The whole building is burning down. Now, but the ou that stands here with a hose reel, he's going to burn to death. I say, if there's anybody standing there with a hose reel, he should burn to death. He's supposed to run out the building. The hose is plastic, man. So what does it matter if that's copper? And there's water in the pipe. Take a plastic bag, put a fish in there, put the lighter there, walk away, come back next Christmas, and the fish is still good. These racks contain float hose, 90 meters reach. That's 30 meters. If a firefighter would ever touch something like that, ek sal hom fire. That is an insult to a firefighter. You can't fight fire with that thing. You wash cars with it, or you build like wooden boxes around them so they look nicer, but that's what you do with those things. A fireman can use that. The flow in that is good, and it has a reach of 90 meters. So you can have one of these for each 3 or 4 hose reels even, in an office floor, for instance, or a factory floor. Water tanks come in all shapes and sizes, and so I challenged the establishment and I started putting up JoJo water tanks. And they say, you have now really gone crazy. I said, okay, I'll take the words JoJo off. Then it's just water tanks. I mean, why can't you use a JoJo tank? That must be, I say, why? No, same reason, it'll burn down. I say, by the time the fire reaches the tanks will probably be empty. Yes, you're right. Because your sprinkler system didn't work. And so if the 2 tanks now burn down, I mean, we've lost the factory 100 million rands worth of losses. Now we're going to lose 2 tanks, 12,000 rands each. Is it the figures that bother you? You can use any reservoir, man, as long as the water is kind of potable. You only need to word your rational design so that it will stand. And if it stands, it's good enough. That's why we call it a rational design. You see, that's what I earlier said, Sir Stephanus Nel. Fanny Nel. That's what Van, en nog makkelijker. Net. Hulle maak dit al hoe makliker. Van, hier is die ding, ek het net nou gesê, there is no perfect rational design. You see, if I look at the rational designs, they've all got 2 oceans of water, all of these are steel tanks, all of them have 2 pumps, and they bow to the pumps. Have you seen what they do with fire pumps? Just because they're red, they bow to them. They test them every week, they feather dust them. Hulle verf hulle. 'n Boer vat 'n lusterpomp, hy gooi hom in die rivier, daar sit hy ding vir 30 jaar en hy pomp in die bos, bissies bewe. 'n Fire pump, my magtig. You can take a submersible pump and put it inside the tank and don't have a pump room and a little panel like that on the side. You say, can you do that? Yes, you've got my permission. And NFPA's got my permission, and so they published it. That there is an NFPA graded submersible pump, a rather large one, I agree, but you get the idea. That borehole will definitely sustain a sprinkler system. And all you need is 'n ingenieur hidrologies, is dit 'n hidrologiese ingenieur? Of ek weet nie wat daai groot woorde is nie, maar 'n ingenieur wat met water werk, as hy daai boorgat kan sertifiseer en sê, this borehole will supply this for so much and that. Where I live over a dolomite area, and there's a lake underneath my house, and I can pump for 92 hours a day, and I can't make a dent in the water supply. Far better than any tank that any sprinkler company can erect. Access through roofs, I've touched on that, solar panels and screens and cladding. Now this is an architect, and this is where I really get so excited when I speak to architects about an architect. Because now you can say, yeah, but you're now insulting us. No, I'm going to insult him. Okay, it's not you, it's nothing personal. This ook is now in Europe. Stefano Boeri, nogal ewe. Ek kan nie glo die ou se naamste, is amper soos Van Boer. Van? Bosco verticala, die vertikale bos, oerwoud. Nou, wat hy doen is, he steps the balconies en dan plant hy bome. Is nie vetplante nie. Dis nie soos jou ouma se rotstuin in Prieska was nie. Dis 'n bloody boom. Now, can you imagine with our maintenance regime in South Africa? I mean, we can't even maintain a tap, man. Wat nog te sê van 'n bos? Weet jy hoe gaan daai ding lyk na 3 jaar? Het gaan lyk asof hy daar in die middel van die Karoo staan, gaan dit 'n droë takke wees. Can you imagine the vertical fire spread there? And our luck, we'll plant pine to begin with. Because the Department of Water Affairs now chops them out, so we're going to say, well, we'll save them and plant them on our balconies. Boerie. Kyk hoe lyk dit. The Europeans are crazy. Hulle raak mal, ek sweer. Europeërs. Yes, koekoes. But this is now in Japan and in China en al die ander plekke waar daar bome is. Of nie genoeg bome is nie. There is murder and robbery's venster. I was standing inside when I took this picture of that steel screen. Now you can see what they've done with it. Now you won't believe me. I do a roadshow with my friend there, Rudolf die rooi neus reindier. Nee, Rudy? And we've done, I think, like 7 cities now. And one of the last ones was in October, we did Ekurhuleni. The Ekurhuleni fire chief is sitting there with her whole cabal. The building control officers sit there like they're going out of fashion. I think they've got 12 of these things. I show these pictures. I discuss it. It's still there. I turned my phone off. No, man, this mustn't happen. I turned it off, power off. Oh, I should have pressed it again. Sorry. Still there. So what else can a girl do? I told them everything. And they don't listen. There is Pretoria Oos, Netcare Hospital. All the wards look like that, all the roofs. You say, yeah, but it's only on the one side. I hear they say, yeah, but it's only in the morning sun. Okay, so you've still determined what the fire strategy is going to be there. It's got to be internal aggressive. That's a factory. Buildings under construction. Big problem. So we've got this timeline. We've got approved building plans. So we start with a groot bang. En na gaat ons met die gebou. 39 stories, 205 stories. I don't know, we're digging foundations to China and then we build right back up past the foundation again. En daar gat ons in die lug in. And now it catches fire on a Saturday afternoon. And we don't know on what floor it is. We arrive there as firefighters and we look at it and it's somewhere between nowhere and nowhere. It's way up in the sky. How do you instruct firefighters to get there? How do they get there in the first place? There's no lifts, there's nothing. And I say the rational design should have considered that on every 5th floor you should have had a big white board with a black number on and say this is floor 5, floor 10, floor 15, so that one can judge it from the outside. And have the construction lift live 24/7 so that they can use that for access. Fire department access doesn't mean the day that we all move in, dan gaan nou 'n paadjie rondom die gebou wees, nou kan die brandweer waar daar ry nie. That's not what it means. It means access in every sense of the word. I don't know where I got words like value chain from. I don't know what it means. So I'm going to skip that slide. High-rise building. Summary. Onus on you, peer reviews, engineers. Now, you know that there is no review board any longer. I don't know what Rudolph done, but there's no review board. They suspended the thing in October, no, Rudolphy. And in my opinion, it's never going to be there. Rudolph will tell you that they will revive it one day, you know, like 2027 or somewhere. But of course, it's not going to happen. There are two issues here that's important. The one is that Wynand thinks it's unconstitutional and submitted such to the public protector. And then at the same time, also, Johannesburg City Council made a submission and said a national individual sitting on a national level, and it's probably the only person in the whole government sphere that this thing had happened, where a national functionary took a decision about what happens in the village of Pretoria. It's unconstitutional. It's a national level, then there's provincial, then there's local. Locals must decide about local issues. And so then in October, the minister was forced, his hand was forced by the High Court to suspend the review board. So there's no review board. So Johannesburg informed me personally that they are looking at the possibility of creating a review board in Johannesburg. I like the idea of a local authority having a review board and calling in peers, but also in the sprinkler inspection entity, we are also going to create a voluntary review board so that we can help the engineers along with their reviews. The end. There are seven or nine PRN techs that registered as engineers other, and EXA then originally recognized them as engineers fire instead of other. But they didn't give them letters, as Rudolph will confirm. They didn't give them letters, but they are considered as, let's call them fire engineers. But there is no such a category as fire engineering at EXA. And so the dilemma that we have is that the fire departments do recognize those. Then those other mechanical and civil engineers also went and got their letters. Then the fire department started saying, we can't accept these letters from EXA, although they don't have the authority to refuse them. What now happens, now they've got to review those submissions word for word, because they don't trust those engineers submitting it. And that's the dilemma. Mostly, when it's one of these 7 or 9 original PR-Eng texts that bring the designs, they mostly sign off on them. And they trust those. The other guys that come around, they say, we're also engineers. And the engineers that shouted me down and they want to throw rocks at me and so on. And I don't actually care what they do because they're wrong. Because EXA has made a mess of the whole registration process. And that's where the dilemma lies. It's with those engineers that had received letters, and now they are actually the ones with the attitude. They come to the fire brigade and say, you've got to accept this rational design because I'm an engineer. No, you don't even understand fire science. Here's the thing. You can't now, today, you can't go with a TUT qualification and register as a PR-Eng tech any longer, because EXA says that the syllabus at TUT is only 41% engineering and the rest is science. But now if you're a mechanical engineer, then 100% of your syllabus is engineering. So where's the fire science? And that's the dilemma. So you gave people a letter now, and now they come here, they've gotten this letter from you, and now they've got an attitude. And Johnny Depp says, listen to what Johnny Depp says. I don't know whether you know Johnny Depp. He's a deep psychologist. He's a philosopher of note. He says the problem, madam, is not the problem. Your attitude about the problem is the problem. He says in Caribbean, what's it? What? Pirates of the Caribbean. He says the problem is not the problem. You see, if the problem was the problem, we could solve it. But now you have an attitude about the problem. Now we've got to solve the attitude first. So the rational design is not the problem. Your attitude about the rational design is the problem. There is no legal basis for council to say to you as a tenant that you must just out of the blue now supply. If they've given you a COO and you moved into the building, the COO is your baseline document that says this building complied with the minimum safety requirements. So they can't come afterwards, except if you change the fire load to such a degree that they've got reason to believe that you're now going to manufacture or store explosives instead of plastic boxes. Do you understand? They can't just come and bully you and say, I want to see a rational design. So I want to see your grandma then. I mean, on what basis?
Thank you, Wynand.
Yes, is this lovely? I'll give you a bottle too.
No, you can take one.
Let's take the full one.